Good evening. The July 26th meeting of the Roseville Independent Redistricting Commission is called to order. Clerk, will you call roll?
Commissioner Borowak? Here. Casperson?
Here.
Frank?
Here.
Griffith?
Here.
Ludwig?
Here.
McPhail?
Here.
Sweeney? Absent. Wagoner?
Here.
Waldrop?
Here.
Willoughby?
Here.
And for our alternates, Commissioner Donor? Here. Kuhn?
Here.
Slaughter?
Here.
Okay, we have Commissioners O'Keefe and our alternate Krafka, is absent. And also a note to let you know that our alternate Lori Benitez has resigned, so she won't be present. But we do have a quorum.
All right, thank you. Vice Chair Borowiak, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We will now open our meeting to public comment. I believe the telephone number is scrolling on the screen, so if you'd like to call in, you're welcome to, and I don't see anybody in the audience. So we wait just a second, see if anyone calls, please. Okay, no calls coming in. So our first order of business is approval of the minutes from the prior meeting. Does anybody have any corrections to the minutes that have been distributed?
May I have a motion, please?
I make a motion that we approve the minutes.
I second the motion.
Thank you. Commissioner Borowak?
Aye.
Casperson?
Aye.
Frank?
Aye.
Griffith?
Aye.
Ludwig?
Aye.
McPhail?
Aye.
Wagoner?
Aye.
Waldrop?
Aye.
And Willoughby.
Aye.
Okay, minutes are approved.
Okay, so next on the agenda is item 6.1, report from Joe Mandel.
Good evening, everybody. You're going to hear from me a lot tonight as we go over a whole bunch of items, but this first item, item 6.1, is just to go over the revised scope of work from Flow Analytics and to go into some of the background. As you recall, the city published a request for proposals looking for professional demographic and mapping services back in March. And at our last meeting on June 28th, we reviewed the proposals, the 3 proposals that were submitted. And after some presentations by each of the proposers, the group voted to recommend to the City Council that we move forward with a professional services agreement with Flow Analytics. And so part of that was the scope of work that Flow Analytics had prepared had a little bit more information than we needed in it. And so over the past couple of weeks, I've been going and revising that scope with them. And so this item is just kind of explained to you what we pulled out of there and what we ultimately ended up keeping in their scope of work. So I believe you all have a copy of their revised scope of work in front of you. The first thing that I kind of wanted to point out was cost, because I know that there was some discussion last time about the numbers were around $75,000 overall for where the other proposers were, and Flow's proposal was around the $100,000 mark, and a lot of that was because of the additional training and public hearings that were included in their original scope of work, as well as there were a couple of optional items that they included in there. And so the budget for this, it's the very last page that you have in your proposal. You'll see that it's a not to exceed amount of $96,140. But I want to kind of back into the number of what it sort of really is, because there's a little bit of additional optional in-person or virtual public hearing items in there where we added a little bit of extra padding into the budget in the event that we need to have more public hearings than what they estimated, because we may not have time to go back to council to get city council to get this contract amended in the event we are up against a November, December, January timeline. So if you pull out around $4,500 worth of optional, in the event we need them, items there, as well as if you look at the item number 3 in their budget, in-person public hearing support times 5. That's the 5 public hearings that we're going to do in the 5 separate council districts. And they originally had 10 in there. And so that number came down by half, but also this is a budget for in-person hearing support. And so they will be here in person at that number, and that's great. And the other item I wanted to point out, that's one of the bigger cost drivers in this, is the item 2B, the baseline demographic assessment. That's about a $9,000 option that we are including in there. And the reason why we're doing that, that's basically what that's going to do is we're going to take the 2010 census data and look and see what everything means from the 2010 data, and then update it and kind of overlay it and compare it and write a report as to what changed from 2010 to 2011. And given the short time frame that we're going to have to review this census data, I think this was a really important option that we included in there, because it'll really explain, and I would say most of this is going to show growth into the western area of Roseville. If you look and see how our districts, and specifically District 5, are drawn now, it's a large geographic area, but it's based on a smaller population from the 2010 census, and I'm one of many people that are very curious to see how much West Roseville has grown from 2010 to 2011 and how we'll need to change boundaries and things like that. So that was an additional option that Flow Analytics was offering that I thought would provide a great amount of information to the public as well as all of us on the commission. And so really the number is around, probably, if you took out the optional items, you're around 82, 83-ish thousand for the overall contract, but then we added in a couple of other items to make this and again, it's a not to exceed amount of 96,000 for this entire contract. It's really an estimated cost of around 91,000 in the event we don't need the optional hearings, but overall, I think this is a great opportunity to get a great team on board with Flow, that they're going to kind of go over some of the tasks that they're going to be providing for us. The first task that they're going to provide is just project planning and outreach with kickoff meetings, and that's going to be with the clerk's office, Sonia, Helen, and I, with just getting, kickoff meeting, identifying points of contact, community outreach, engagement plans, just overall planning, timelines, figuring out future meeting dates when they'll be coming here. Also figuring out community outreach strategy to determine who the appropriate stakeholders and community groups are in the city that should be aware of all of this and who we should get engaged and have participate and hear their voices. They're also going to be performing training for all of you, and the training's kind of broken up into 4 phases. We're thinking that we're going to be doing it all in one meeting in September. As of right now, we do not have a meeting in August, and we don't plan on having a meeting in August, but in September we will do a training, and that training is really going to go over like just an introduction of what we're here for, what the redistricting process is, what the redistricting laws are, both on the federal side and the California side. Talking about communities of interest and community engagement, and what are they now, how are we going to be using those in redistricting, as well as some of the redistricting fundamentals of using the online mapping tools and software and things like that that the public will be able to use. So that'll be an overall training that Flow provides to us at the September meeting. So that's going to be a bulk of what our meeting is in September. The bulk of the meeting here tonight is really just learning Brown Act, public records, conflicts of interest, and also just some basics about what Flow is going to be doing for their demographer services. So after September, after we get our training, there's going to be some more project management done by Flow where, they're going to prepare and handle the analysis and data collection and compilation and look at attendance areas and boundaries. And that's when they'll do this baseline demographic analysis as well that I was mentioning, where it's going to show the difference between 2010 and 2020 census data. They will also be joining us at all 5 of the public hearings. Each one of them is going to be in one of the city's 5 districts. and those meetings will be facilitated by Flo's team. There's also going to be the online mapping tool, like I mentioned, that people will be able to draw their own maps, and each one of those maps will be analyzed and evaluated. And ultimately, at least 4 maps will be prepared for discussion at the public hearings and potential city council adoption and discussion. And so this is just Flo being involved with us throughout the entire process, you know, being another set of a great team, experienced team in the room to help us out. And so this is what their updated proposal is. It's going to the city council for approval or potential approval on August 4th. And after that, we will, like I said, we will be handling kickoff meetings with Flo, and then we'll take August off from this whole commission and then start again in September with trainings by Flo and Flo's team. So I just wanted to present this as an informational item. I'm happy to answer any questions. Like I said, this is going to go to council for approval at the August 4th meeting, so I don't know if there's going to be any further public comment or anything from anybody. This was an option tonight for people to come and speak and give their comments on it as well. But if any of you have any questions or comments, I'd be happy to answer any of them now.
Do any commission members have questions regarding the presentation? Seeing none, we'll open it up to public comment. A reminder, the number is 916-774-5353. Are there any calls? We'll close public comment. Again, this item is for information only and requires no action by the commission. The next item is item number 6.2, Commissioner Training. Joe, this one's yours also.
Okay, like I said, you're going to hear me a lot tonight. So we have a PowerPoint tonight to do some training for everyone on the basics of the Brown Act, conflicts of interest, and public records training. You all have a copy of the presentation in front of you as well, and I'd invite you to all take notes, ask me any questions, ask Helen any questions you have at the end of this. Feel free to email us, call us anytime. Anybody in either one of our offices is pretty experienced in dealing with all of these issues, so please, if and when anything ever comes up, I encourage you to come to us, ask us questions. And so this is the overall basic training. We do this for all of we have 15 different boards and commissions here at the city. We do these trainings for all the boards and commissions, so if you've been on one of our boards before, you may have heard some of this, but there are some interesting things that are applicable to the Independent Redistricting Commission that I'm going to point out here just to show, you know, there's a little bit of extra separation that we have from a normal commission that the city, normally the city's boards and commissions, you are appointed by the city council, so there's a potential that there's a little bit of what's the word I would be? You may have some alliances or allegiances with a city council member in the event that they were appointing you to a commission. So the Independent Redistricting Commission is just that. We are independent of all city council control, and that's how we, you know, we're drawing names out of a hat originally, and you know, got all of us up here. So with that, again, my name is Joe Mandel. Senior Deputy City Attorney for the City of Roseville. I'm going to be doing a short presentation tonight on a set of laws focused on public participation and transparency, commonly referred to as the Brown Act, Conflict of Interest laws, and the Public Records Act. And I'm going to explain how each one of those laws apply to the Independent Redistricting Commission. So again, if you've served on a board or commission, you've seen this before, but there's been some updates in the laws, and a refresher is always nice. So I'll go through those changes in the laws a little bit later. And next slide, thanks. So the first question on everybody's mind is, what is the Brown Act? The Brown Act is an act of the California State Legislature that was authored by Assemblymember Ralph M. Brown back in 1953 that guarantees the public's right to attend and participate in meetings of local legislative bodies. It's a group of sunshine laws, as they were called back in the 1950s to 1970s, and really they were there to ensure that proceedings of government agencies were open and available to the public. So for those taking notes, or if you want to look this up a little bit later, the Brown Act starts at California Government Code Section 54950, Government Code 54950. And really the basic rule behind the Brown Act is that a majority of the members of a legislative body cannot get together to discuss, deliberate, or take action on any matter that would normally go before the commission unless it is at a properly noticed meeting. So the main principles of the Brown Act are mainly transparency and allowing public participation, as shown on this slide. The public has the right to know what actions its elected and appointed officials are taking. The legislative body must meet in the open and not secretly, and the public has the right to attend and participate in public meetings. Next slide, please. What types of legislative bodies does the Brown Act apply to? It applies to the governing body of a city or county, like the Roseville City Council, the Placer County Board of Supervisors, and it also applies to subsidiary bodies that were created by formal action. So a little bit of background, back in November 2020, the voters in Roseville approved Measure R, which established the Independent Redistricting Commission and created Article 11 in the Roseville City Charter. And that Article 11 states that the Independent Redistricting Commission shall be independent of council control, that it will conduct an open and transparent process to enable full participation, consideration, and comment on the drawing of council district boundaries. It'll comply with all laws and will conduct itself with fairness and integrity. So since the Brown Act does apply to the Independent Redistricting Commission, we're going to look at some of the details of some of the things that we need to make sure we're following. Next slide, please. Again, since the Brown Act does apply to this commission, there's certain requirements that need to be met in order to adequately inform the public of the actions that are being taken. Before holding a public meeting of the Independent Redistricting Commission, we need to provide proper notice to the public and post an agenda. So with regard to proper noticing of a meeting, a regular meeting, the notice needs to be posted 72 hours in advance in a publicly accessible place. And for a special meeting, the agenda needs to be posted at least 24 hours in advance in a publicly accessible place. And what I mean by a publicly accessible place is something in the city that's the library, the downtown library, Maidu, Riley Library, the Civic Center. We also post it online on our webpage. So something that's a publicly accessible place that anybody can see it. And COVID has certainly impacted some of our procedures related to public meetings, as we've seen from this commission and other commissions. But technology still helps us make sure that we can get through all this and hold all of our necessary public meetings. And I imagine that there will be laws passed in the future that will help facilitate public meetings and public participation remotely. And I think this is kind of here to stay, and maybe not for cities as small as us, but there are bills that are being introduced around the legislature right now to kind of continue the teleconferencing and video conferencing of meetings, depending on the size of your population. So the comment that I have in there, the final bullet about meetings must be held within the city, again, related to COVID, the exceptions really relate to members teleconferencing from outside, a location outside of the city. But again, most of the time, you're going to be having your meetings held inside of the city limits. Next slide, please. In addition to providing the public with prior notice, an agenda must also be posted. And the purpose of the agenda is to inform the public about what the commission is acting upon at the meeting. You need to provide an opportunity for public comment, and you cannot prohibit criticism. Each item must contain a general brief description of each item of business to be transacted or discussed at the meeting, and no action or discussion can take place on an item that is not posted on the agenda. So part of our job in the city attorney's office is ensuring compliance with the Brown Act requirements for each of the city's boards and commissions, so that the commissioners can focus more of their time on the subject matter and a little bit less on the procedure. So we can help make sure all that's taken care of. Next slide, please. So what is a meeting technically under the Brown Act? You can see here that a meeting is defined as any congregation of a majority of the members of a legislative body at the same time and location to hear, discuss, deliberate, or take action upon any item within the subject matter jurisdiction of the legislative body. So several key points here to really point out are that a majority of the members is the one thing at the same time and location cannot hear, discuss, deliberate, or take action on any item that would normally be before this body. So things to keep aware of. And there's a few ways that violations could potentially typically occur, and I'm going to go over those in the next slides. Probably the biggest issue these days is regarding a type of prohibited meeting called a seriatim meeting, which is really just a fancy word for it's a series of meetings. And the concern there with the seriatim meeting is that a majority of the members shall not, outside of an authorized meeting, use a series of communications of any kind directly or through intermediaries to discuss, deliberate, or take action on any item of business of the legislative body, and that includes email. A couple of examples of how this typically occurs is one of them is called the chain of communications, and really it's just, Commissioner number one, A, says something to B, says something to C, and it just goes down the line. And so then you start finding out the positions and ideas and everything of each one of the members. And so those chains of communications are prohibited, as well as another kind of concept is what's called the hub of a wheel, where someone acts as the hub and talks to everybody as the individual spokes of the wheel. And so we are not supposed to do that as well. So make sure that if you are communicating with anybody on the commission, that neither one of these are the two probably most common types of examples of how you would run into a Brown Act violation. So again, most of the concerns can be alleviated by just talking about commission business at a commission meeting. So that's great. Next slide, please. The issue of serial meetings has become a hot topic over the last couple years with the increased use of social media. And you can see that there's a potential to encounter a Brown Act problem with things like emails, reply to alls, group texts, Facebook comments, Nextdoor, and other similar types of public forums. And so you are allowed to use those as commissioners to communicate, answer questions to the public, provide information to the public, solicit information from the public on the commission business. All of that is okay to do. And usually a single contact between one public official and another public official would not normally be prohibited because it's less than a quorum, less than a majority of the overall body. But different rules now apply to social media after the introduction of California Assembly Bill 992, which was passed in 2020 to address public officials' use of social media. Next slide, I'll go over AB 992 and what that is. So if you're someone who is active on social media, this is an important item for you. So AB 992 prohibits members of a legislative body from responding directly to any communication on an internet-based social media platform regarding a matter that's within the subject matter jurisdiction of the legislative body that's made, posted, or shared by any other member of the legislative body. So what's important to know out of all of that is if one of the members of this commission comments on, reacts, or posts anything related to another member's social media post, that is now a Brown Act violation under AB 992. So don't comment, retweet, like, thumbs up, smiley face, negative emojis, positive emojis. None of that stuff is allowed anymore after AB 992. So very important that, again, if you're on social media, please don't post anything in reaction to another fellow member's social media post. That's really the big takeaway here. But if you are active on social media, that's perfectly fine to be able to provide information to people. And I'm going to go over in the next slide some of the ways that you are allowed to have individual communications. So next slide, please. These are the permitted individual communications. And you can see here that you're allowed to enter into separate communications outside of these meetings to answer questions, provide information, as long as you don't communicate to the members of the rest of the commission the comments or position of any other commissioner. So again, keep information to yourself. Don't spread things around. We shouldn't know what each other are thinking and commenting on. So emails concerning commission business are public records, even if they're sent on your personal devices or from your personal email accounts. So it's best not to use your personal accounts to conduct city business. I'll go into that a little bit later when I'm talking some more about public records. But just something to be aware of, that all of these emails concerning commission business are public records. So again, you can provide information, but don't communicate the comments or positions to any other members of the commission. Next slide, please. Now that we know what is a meeting, let's look at technically what is not a meeting under the Brown Act, because this is a question that I get asked frequently, and you may have a question about this every once in a while. So here's your little cheat sheet that you can use. You can see that a meeting is not any one of these items listed here. So any conferences open to the public that involve a discussion of issues of general interest, that's not considered a meeting subject to the Brown Act. An open and publicized community meeting organized by a person or organization other than the local agency. I'm thinking of things like Arcona, the Roseville Coalition of Neighborhood Associations. If they have a community meeting, that's not subject to the Brown Act. Third bullet, if you're attending an open and noticed meeting of another body of a local agency or legislative body, those are things, Placer County Board of Supervisors, or the, city's planning commission, or any one of our boards and commissions. As long as another board or commission is properly noticed, they can attend. You can attend. Another type of meeting that is not considered a meeting under the Brown Act is just a purely social or ceremonial occasion, something like splash or a retirement party or a concert in the park, something like that. And then also attending a standing committee as an observer. So you're allowed to go as long as you don't discuss, deliberate, participate in anything. I mean, technically we could have all of the council members here, and as long as they're just observing. This is a publicly noticed meeting, and so no one else is allowed to participate though. So all of these items, if you're interested in maybe attending another meeting or going to a social or ceremonial occasion and you're wondering, can I do this under the Brown Act? This is your little sheet that you can go back and take a look at. And again, feel free to give me a call if you have a question about any of that as well. Next slide, please. Just as an FYI to keep in your back pocket, there are criminal and civil penalties associated with violations of the Brown Act. The criminal penalties apply for each member of a legislative body who attends the meeting where an action is taken in violation of the Brown Act, and where the member intends to deprive the public of information which the member knows or has reason to know that the public is entitled to know under the Brown Act. And you'd be guilty of a misdemeanor in that instance. So again, important to note here, for criminal penalties to apply, there needs to be knowledge and intent to deceive the public. So I don't anticipate that happening here with this commission, but always nice to point out. There are criminal penalties, but there are also civil remedies available in the event that there's a Brown Act violation. An injunction may be filed to stop an action from taking place or to prevent future violations of the Brown Act, or an action can be taken to invalidate some action that was taken that was not in substantial compliance with the Brown Act. So again, our office is very aware of items that are going to councils and commissions to make sure that we are following the Brown Act properly, so that there are no violations and no potential invalidations or anything like that. Next slide, please. Okay, that's kind of topic number one, the Brown Act, talking about open meetings, open, transparent meetings to the public. This is going to kind of segue into another topic on conflicts of interest. This is another big topic that everyone should be aware of. Again, applies to all of our boards and commissions. I'm not sure how much it will apply to this board and commission, but important for everybody to know. So when I talk about conflicts of interest, I really want to point out the general premise regarding conflicts of interest is that city officials should not make decisions on or participate in matters that may result in personal gain or impermissible bias. And you'll see up there, there's 4 bullets that are the 4 main types of conflict of interest laws. And I'm going to go into them in detail, but they're basically categorized into the first one, conflicts related to contracts. The second one is related to financial conflicts, gifts that are given or income sources. There's also the concept of doctrine of incompatible offices, where you'd have conflicts in duties that you were performing, as well as the overall conflict related to any campaign contributions or bias that you may have. So going into those in some greater detail and staying on this slide a little bit, California Government Code Section 1090 says that a public official may not make a contract in which he or she is financially interested. That's just period, end of story. You cannot make a contract in which you are financially interested. You can't recuse yourself from the vote, and the city is absolutely prohibited from entering into that contract in any way. So that's kind of an easy one for us to follow. The next category in the second bullet, the Political Reform Act of 1974, that gets into a little bit more detail about conflicts of interests, and it relates to the public officials' disclosure of their economic interests and prohibitions on participation in making decisions that the public official knows or has reason to know will result in a material financial effect on one of the official's economic interests. Again, we're looking at, do you have any financial conflicts? Do you have any economic? Is your spouse working for someone that there is a potential revenue stream or income stream? We're looking at gift sources, income sources. We're looking at, do you own property within a certain distance away from where a decision is being made? Because property ownership can relate to conflicts of interest if it will impact things like rental income or fair market value of the property or character of the property, something like that. We're also looking at business entities and any investments that you may make. And if you remember, when you applied to be on this commission, you filled out a California Fair Political Practices Commission Form 700, which was your statement of economic interests. And that's really where you disclose, here's where I work, here's my source of income, here's my spouse's source of income, here's my rental properties that I own within the city of Roseville, here's business entities that I'm interested in, or that I have an interest in. Those are the sorts of things that are disclosed so that we can understand where you may potentially have a conflict. But one important thing that I want everyone to know on the commission is that commissioners are responsible for their own compliance. You can ask for an opinion or help from our office and the city attorney's office. That's not going to get you any sort of, free get out of jail free card. You can also get an opinion from the FPPC if you'd like one. But again, overall, commissioners are responsible for their own compliance and identifying conflicts. So just something to be aware of. Again, not really a big deal on this commission, but in the event you serve on another board or commission, you'll have this information in the back of your mind. So that's bullet point number 2. The third bullet point, the doctrine of incompatible offices, really relates to commissioners can't hold 2 incompatible public offices simultaneously because there's a potential conflict or overlap in your functions or responsibilities of your offices. On this commission, we had a couple of applicants that were on other boards or commissions that applied to this one as well. And again, like I mentioned before, there may be some allegiance was the word I was looking for. There may be some allegiance to a city council member or a loyalty to this existing city council because you were appointed by that city council. And again, we want everyone to be independent of everything. So the idea was if you got appointed to this commission, you would automatically be vacating your other position if you were on another board or commission. So we don't have any of those here. Everybody's officially independent, and no boards or commissions that anybody is currently on. So nothing to really worry about here, but just as an overall to be aware of this concept in conflict of interest law about the doctrine of incompatible offices. And the final bullet that we're going to talk about is campaign contributions and bias. And really what this is we're just trying to avoid the appearance of impropriety and any sort of bias related to supporting one council member or commissioner or something over another. And so we try to do that as, avoid this appearance of impropriety as much as possible. And if we move on to the next slide, this is, with this commission specifically, Article 11 of the Roseville City Charter, which again relates to the Independent Redistricting Commission. If anybody ever wants to look at the Roseville City Charter, on our homepage, up at the top of the screen, there's a tab for government, and it does a drop down. And within that government tab, there's like government, resident, how do I find stuff? So government, and then there's a link straight to our municipal code. And so the charter is like our constitution, and the municipal code is like all of our laws that we set forth in the city. So Article 11 of the Roseville City Charter establishes the Independent Redistricting Commission and sets forth various qualifications and restrictions to be a member on the Independent Redistricting Commission. And this was, again, to avoid the appearance of impropriety or bias or something. And so part of the requirements and qualifications to be a member of this commission is that you can't have been a candidate for city council for a certain period of time before this commission was formed and a certain period of time after. You can't be an employee of a candidate. You can't be a consultant of a candidate. You can't be a family member. You can't make campaign contributions. You can't volunteer. You can't endorse candidates. There's a specific time period before and after. Everybody met that time period before because we would have disqualified you had you not been in compliance with all of this. But also you have a continuing obligation to not do any of these things after this commission is over. You can't enter into a contract with the city. No compensation for anyone. And the bullet about political party registration, that means that just relates to the entire makeup of this board was not supposed to be the same political party designation. There needed to be at least more than one registered, political party affiliation amongst everybody. We have that here, so there's not an issue, but, in the event there was all of one political party, we would have to go back out and find some new commissioners. So we're all good here, but I just wanted everybody to be aware of, these are some pretty big items that we have here for the commission to follow to make sure that there is no bias, to make sure that there is no appearance of impropriety. And I'd like to thank all of you for qualifying for all of this. Next slide, please. There's some due process considerations associated with conflicts of interest as well. And so, with you being responsible for compliance as the commissioner, you will have to think, do I need to recuse myself? And again, this is another little item that you can go back and look at in the event you have a question in the future. So if there is a personal interest, if you have a personal interest in the decision, then you probably should recuse yourself. And to do that, really, you just state the nature of the conflict for the record, and then you leave the room until the agenda item's completed. Typically what we do is we go into this room, close the door, then when the item's over, we come in and get you and you come back up. And so that's if you have a personal interest in the decision. If there's an appearance of impropriety, do you need to recuse yourself? Ethically, yes, you probably should. And so if you have questions or concerns or, are weighing whether or not to do that, please feel free to contact me. We see, conflicts and people recusing themselves all the time. So we can tell you, yes, this is typically a situation that you would, or no, go ahead and just move forward. Again, I mentioned the statement of economic interest, that Form 700 that each one of you filled out when you were an applicant, and that was to disclose all of your economic interests. That's a public record, and so that's out there, and that's important for all boards and commissions and all public officials, as well as there's a gift limit. And I guess my overall advice for all of you on this Independent Redistricting Commission that is doing a great job at not showing bias or an appearance of bias, I would not accept any gifts on this commission at all. But as a public official, you need to report any gift over $50. And the gift limit it changes and increases year after year, and so that's why I put it in here that the gift limit, you cannot receive $520 worth of total gifts in any given year from a single source. So $49 gifts are not required to be reported, but if you add up 49, 49, 49, 49, once you get over, you have to start reporting, and you cannot accept anything over $520 total. It started out around 400 and then it's just slowly increased over the last few years to the point that it is now. But again, my 2 cents worth of free advice is I would not accept a gift by being on this commission. That'd be a good idea. Next slide, please. Okay, we're in the home stretch. This is the final big topic that we're going to talk about here, the California Public Records Act. So the first one we talked about was the Brown Act. Then we talked about conflicts of interest. Now we're going to talk about the California Public Records Act. And the purpose of the California Public Records Act at California Government Code Section 6250 and several pages thereafter, Public Records Act is to provide information that enables the public to monitor the functioning of their government. And the legislature declared the right to access information as a fundamental and necessary right. Policy favors disclosure of public information, and there's very narrowly construed exceptions. So most things are going to be, part of the public record. I will tell you that the definition under the Public Records Act of a public record is any writing containing information relating to the conduct of the local agency's business that's prepared, owned, used, or retained by the city regardless of any physical form. So moving on to the next slide, I'll go into a couple of more details about that. And the biggest one are, think about your emails. Think about all of your emails that you send off regarding redistricting commission business. All of those emails are public records. All of those emails can be requested by any member of the public or the district attorney or anyone in between. So just note what you're saying, note how you're commenting, that all of this could be disclosed. It could be in the newspaper, it could be online, even if it's sent from a personal device or on a personal account. So the comment up there about don't use personal accounts or devices to conduct city business. If you have a Facebook page, that's a personal Facebook page, people will create a, I am a public official, this is my Facebook page for being on the Redistricting Commission. Or if you have just an email address, some people create an email address that is specific to their board or commission that they're on, just so that they know that we do get requests for, I want any and all communications that have been sent by any board or commission member. And if you have that, you can just go to that email account, pretty easy, just dump it all and send it all over our way. And we review everything before things are disclosed to determine if there's any exceptions or legal exemptions or reasons why things should be disclosed. But for the most part, pretty safe to say that your emails concerning redistricting business are going to be subject to disclosure. So my comment in there about personal devices may be subject to disclosure. There was the idea of, well, if I use my personal phone and text someone on their personal phone as well, then that whole thing's, but if you're conducting city business, then you still may potentially have to turn over your personal device, which has city business that was conducted on it. So best to, just kind of separate it out as much as you can and, make it so that in the event you needed to just hand over the folder, hand over the file, you'd be able to do that, no problem. Next slide, please. All right. My final words of advice or caution, however you want to look at it, is that a majority of the members cannot discuss independent redistricting commission business items among themselves. So no seriatim meetings. Please be careful with your social media posts, comments, emojis, any kind of email forwards and replies. And if anybody has any questions about any of these items, conflicts of interest, public records, any of this, we can help you out in the city attorney's office. We have 6 great attorneys in our office that all handle boards and commissions. And so we can help you out if I'm not around. And so the next slide has our phone number on it, really just asking if anybody has any questions. I will be happy to answer them. And you're welcome to contact me at any time. This is our main line, 916-774-5325. And you have my email address in the agenda. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions on any of this, and we can be here. This is the last item on our agenda tonight, so we can be here for as long or as short as you want to talk about this. You're welcome to email me or call me offline as well if you have a specific question, and I'll send it back to the chair.
Thank you, Joe. Do any commissioners have any questions regarding the presentation? Seeing none, we will open it up for public comment. Are there any calls from the public? None, and there's none in the audience, so we'll close public comment. Again, this presentation was for information only, so there's no action to be taken. Is there any further business for the commission? Or would anybody like to bring up anything for
I would
discussion?
like to bring up something.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Frank. One of the things, this also kind of brought some things to light was, and I don't know what the plans are with the city, but as far as communication with the public goes, we only meet once a month, so we don't talk to each other. But at the same time, when we do meet, we have no one in the audience, we have no one calling. And this was a huge issue a year or two ago about the redistricting. And I just feel that we either need to create either a subcommittee of 2 to 5 members, I think that's safe on Brown Act, that can discuss or get together and discuss a plan for communicating via Nextdoor, Facebook, whatever, the city's website, and get what we are doing, the information out to the residents of Roseville so that we pique their interest and get their comments, because I think transparency was a huge issue on the prior redistricting matter. And I think it goes on and on with the city council, all the different boards and commissions, that transparency is huge in this city. And I think if we get the word out there and encourage people to know what's going on here, how we are selected, that we are truly independent, that there is no lobbying, that there is no bias here, that maybe we can encourage them to come out and give us their 2 cents worth during our meetings, in addition to the 5 public hearing meetings that we have. Just a thought.
Sonia, can you explain a little bit about what the city's already doing?
Well,
for
the City
engagement?
Public Affairs Department will be involved in negotiating with Flo on what our outreach is going to be. Flo's proposal has generally a great outreach component where they'll go out to what we call our constituents. There's also an opportunity for, whether it be a subcommittee or staff, to attend other governmental meetings, Sun City Roseville, Arcona, Chamber of Commerce meetings, to try to get the word out about the whole redistricting process. So whether it be a subcommittee of the commission, I think staff is fully capable of also providing outreach to different organizations. Once we have the kickoff meeting with Flo, we'll really get a general idea of what their proposal is for outreach. We'll work with our public affairs department as well, so there'll be a combination. We will use social media, Nextdoor, Instagram, Facebook, anything that's out there we'll use as far as to send all this information out. They apparently do press releases. There'll be things in the paper. There'll be things submitted to community groups. So there will be outreach. It's these first few meetings are tactical as far as just training and different things, but I expect that you will have great public participation once you have the 4 maps that you want to bring forward to the public. That's when you can really expect.
I have a
Public
question.
draw.
Do you anticipate it to be in September or August when we start seeing like social media coming from the city?
Yeah. Well, once the contract is adopted by the council, hopefully on August 4th, you can expect to start seeing that in September.
Thank you. That's all I had.
Are there any questions regarding the commissioner's comments?
I have something. Just so the outreach would start in September, And we won't have any feedback on that until October, is that right?
Well, we probably won't have our census numbers until October.
Right, all right,
Yeah.
but I mean, I would just be curious of what kind of outreach that would be in September if they were to start. And if we waited until October, that would be good, but it's just kind of odd that, to me, that we would start communicating for this commission and we don't know the nature of the communication. That's all, and I'm just kind of, is there a way that we can know what's going on
Well, it's
there?
kind of a save the date. So we anticipate, we'll know once we meet with Flo when meetings will happen, because we
Okay.
need to sit down. And so it's kind of like save the date. So we will be drawing maps on this date, or we will be proposing these maps on this date. The public hearings will be held on this date. So generally, people can get it on their calendars. That's the kind of communication that we'll have initially.
Okay, that's great. That's the kind of thing that I was curious about. No T-shirts at this point, then. Okay.
Well, I do have a question. Could we still have a subcommittee so that we can communicate, the subcommittee communicate, and decide on a timeline, or maybe discuss plans for communication with Flo, so that we don't have to wait until September to talk to Flo about what our plans are and what communications can and cannot go out or shouldn't go out?
Well, let me ask staff, if we created a subcommittee,
I'm going to jump in here and
would that have
say,
to be agendized?
given what the agenda is today, we cannot create a subcommittee because there is no item on the agenda for today to create one. And so since we're not going to have an August meeting, we can certainly put that on the September agenda as something to also discuss, of like the creation of a subcommittee. But at that time, we may know more information from Flo as well, because once we have our kickoff meetings with Flo, we will distribute a bunch of information out to you as well about what our plan for outreach as of now is, and be able to get your input. Again, it's okay for you to communicate with us as staff and give us your input and ask us to, get more outreach, or what sort of community groups are you working with. We're happy to help out in that sense. And so hopefully we have a lot of information to share with you via email in August, so that when we come in September, we may have an item that we add to the agenda to talk about creation of a subcommittee to do, outreach, or whatever we end up having it be.
What we want to caution on is that we have a consistent message. If the subcommittee is portraying something different than what staff initially thinks should be solicited or sent out to the public, that way we can develop talking points for you.
Right.
If you want to form a subcommittee at a later date.
Yeah, I just feel like we meet once a month, and we're kind of putting everything in that once a month basket, and we're not meeting in August, so September, and we're kind of behind already. I don't even know is Flo going to be in the September meeting? Are they going to be part of it?
We anticipate yes.
Yes.
And based on the fact that we have on the calendar a meeting once a month, I don't anticipate that we'll have just once a month meetings. Once we get the data and the information, I think we're going to have to meet more regularly.
Right. For the public hearings.
Well, for the public hearings and even up to the public hearings.
Oh, okay.
And at any point, can a commissioner communicate with you to request something be put on the agenda, or?
Yes. Typically, it will come to my office, the city clerk's office. I will check with the chair and the city attorney's office to make sure that item can be agendized.
And you would give some consultation and saying, well, we already plan on that being agendized in 2 months, or?
Correct.
Yes.
Correct. And once we have the plan from Flo as far as the dates, we'll send that out to you immediately, so you can get those on your calendar.
Now, in the meantime, could you post on your Facebook saying, mark your calendar for the September 27th
Absolutely.
meeting?
Yes.
All right.
And I also wanted to point out, again, going back to Article 11 of our charter, we have specific language in there that talks about how Commission may establish subcommittees and ad hoc committees, and if those committees are created, they shall report their actions at the next meeting of the Commission. So the intention wasn't to keep it kind of open for several months. The idea was to do an ad hoc or a subcommittee that explores one issue, kind of like what we're talking about, public outreach, and report back on that at the next meeting. So ultimately, if we do that or split up into other subcommittees, just know it would be for a limited time of going into the next meeting or two.
So again, we can't do anything about it tonight.
Can't do anything about
If anybody wants to
it.
request that to be on the September agenda, they can.
Correct. Yes.
Thank
All
you.
right, so as we've heard a couple times, we don't have a meeting in August, and we'll reconvene on September 27th. I would like to request a motion to adjourn this meeting. There's a motion.
Second.
And a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. Thank you. We'll see you on September 27th.